Welcome to The Explainer. When we think of the 2008 financial crisis, the story usually starts with Wall Street greed. But what if that's not the whole picture? Today, we're unpacking a provocative argument that traces the crash back to a well-intentioned, but ultimately catastrophic political idea. And that's really the core idea behind Thomas Sowell's book, Housing Boom and Bust. His whole point is that the seeds of the crisis weren't planted by simple greed. Nope. He argues they were sown by a political crusade that spanned decades, all built around a very appealing goal, making housing affordable for everyone. Okay, so where does Sowell say this all got started? Well, it begins with this really powerful political idea that completely reshaped the housing market as we knew it. And this is where, according to Sowell, things really went off the rails. The term affordable housing stopped being about what the market could actually support. Instead, it became this political mission. The idea was that people should be able to get the house they wanted, and it was the government's job to make that happen, no matter what the underlying economics looked like. So you end up with this huge kind of ironic disconnect, right? On one hand, the stated goal was to make homes more affordable. But Sowell argues that by artificially pumping up demand, these policies sent prices through the roof, making homes less affordable for everyone. And the push to help certain communities, he says it ended up funneling them directly into the riskiest loans out there. Okay, so you have this big political goal. But how exactly does that turn into a full-blown economic bubble? Well, the book points to two big things that basically acted like gasoline on a fire. And the first big problem he points to wasn't even about money. It was about land. In a lot of really desirable places, especially out in coastal California, new open space laws made it incredibly difficult and expensive to actually build new houses. So you're legally choking off the supply of new homes. When demand goes up, the price has nowhere to go but straight up. And you can see this play out so clearly when you look at different cities. Take a place like Dallas, with very few building restrictions. Prices stayed pretty stable, even during the bust. But then look at heavily restricted San Francisco. The price bubble was enormous. Las Vegas is a really fascinating case. For 20 years, prices were flat. Then they brought in new restrictions, and bam, you see the exact same boom and bust cycle. Then you have the second piece of the puzzle, this just immense pressure coming from Washington on pretty much the entire lending industry. Sowell argues that under things like the Community Reinvestment Act, banks were basically pushed and sometimes even threatened with legal action if they didn't abandon their old, safe lending standards to meet these new, politically driven quotas. And what happened next? An absolute explosion of what Sowell calls creative financing. And we're not talking about just slightly riskier loans here. I mean, these were products that would have been laughed out of a bank just a few years earlier. We're talking zero down payments, interest-only mortgages, and get this, even liar loans, where you didn't even have to verify your income. The goal wasn't about long-term, stable homeownership anymore. It was just about getting a signature on that paper. So you've got prices jacked up way beyond what they should be, and you're fueling it all with these incredibly risky loans. At this point, Sowell argues, a crash wasn't just a possibility. It was pretty much inevitable. And when it hit, wow, it wasn't a gentle slide. It was a free fall. In just 1 year, home prices in Phoenix dropped by a third. In San Francisco, down 31%. And in Miami, a 29% plunge. The whole bottom just fell out of the market. And this is where Sowell points out a really tragic irony. The very communities that these policies were supposedly designed to help, they were the ones who were pushed into these incredibly risky subprime loans more than anyone else. And so when the whole thing came crashing down, they were the ones who got hurt the most. So after the crash, what happens? Well, Sowell draws this really sharp line between how the market reacted and how the politicians reacted. On the market side, the adjustment was fast and, pretty logical. Buyers started looking for cheaper homes. Lenders immediately slammed the brakes on those crazy creative loans. But the political response? According to Sowell, it was to double down, calling for bailouts and pushing for more of the very policies he says caused the mess in the first place. And all of this led to an absolute explosion in government spending. In 2009 alone, the federal deficit swelled to over $1.4 trillion. It's a number so big, it's almost impossible to even get your head around. And to help us wrap our heads around a number that big, Sowell uses this incredible analogy. 1 trillion seconds ago was over 31,000 years ago. Think about that. That's the mind-boggling scale of the money that was being spent in response to the crisis. And this brings us to Sowell's final point, which is that this whole pattern of good intentions leading to disaster, well, it's not new at all. He puts the 2008 crisis into a much bigger historical picture. He makes his case by comparing two huge stock market crashes. After the 1929 crash, you had massive government intervention, tariffs, price controls, all of it. The result? A Great Depression that lasted for over a decade. But then, after a really steep crash in 1987, the government basically stayed out. And the result then? The market bounced back on its own and kicked off 20 years of solid growth. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? The crucial point Sowell makes is this. The housing crisis wasn't the free market failing. It was, in his view, a catastrophic failure of government policy that started with good intentions. He argues that a series of political decisions completely twisted the market, which led directly to the inevitable bust. And Sowell's analysis of the housing boom and bust really forces us to wrestle with the tough question. When we're facing a huge, complex problem, should we be more afraid of the crisis itself or of the well-intentioned political cures that are designed to solve it?